All
All
right.
right, well, hello and welcome everyone. For the session today, we've got Jonathan Dedering, and he's going to be presenting on migrating your website to Google Analytics 4, which I'm super excited to, I've been dabbling a little bit, but I'm excited to see this presentation. So I'm Mark Millard from Kel's IT, and I'll be moderating today. So just a couple quick announcements that all of this session will be recorded, and the video will be on the website here probably within a week or so. And we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but please feel free to drop questions in the chat, and then we can just make sure that we get back around to those. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Sounds good. I just want to quick clarify, are we still seeing my desktop or my slides now?
I see your desktop, so like your Outlook, yeah.
Let's try this again. Here we go. This will work. I think you're seeing it now, right? All right.
Now we're seeing your slides. Yep.
Perfect.
All right.
All right. So this is migrating your website to Google Analytics 4, and we're going to take a look at the new Google Analytics 4 platform and discuss some of the things to consider when you're transitioning your site from the old Universal Analytics to the new platform. So a little bit about me, Jonathan Dedering, he, him, his. I'm a member of the client engagement team. I work in the Web Platform Services, WPS group, and I'm a software engineer developer. I went to school for marketing, and I have a degree in web software development. And for Google Analytics, I got started not as a primary role, but I used to work at an advertising agency, and I helped my digital marketing team with sort of the technical implementation of their tag manager and Google Analytics, and that really got me my start. So I've been Google Analytics certified since 2016, and I provide consultation to a number of groups on campus related to their analytics. So there's a handout for today's talk. If you go to this, and somebody could copy that into the chat too, that would be helpful. I have a few resources for you. We'll reference some of these in the talk, but also it's just a list of some good resources to take a look at. So this is what the document looks like. There's just a handful of links. Most of them are the official Google Analytics documentation. All right, and then I also have a Google Analytics blog. It's kind of new, but ga4tricks.com. That's where I'm going to be, or I have been sort of blogging about Google Analytics. It's mainly going to just be some tutorials, but it's along the lines of the content that we're going to be talking about today. Like I said, though, it's new. There's only a couple articles on it, so it's something just to keep an eye on if you like it. But I like to start off my presentations with a joke, cheesy joke. So here goes. What's Forrest Gump's password? A second to think. One Forrest run. What? Sorry, I can't even say it right. One Forrest one. Cheesy. So today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about new metrics and terminology, filtering internal traffic, tracking multiple domains, tracking events, tracking conversions, creating audience filters, creating dashboard reports. So the one thing that we aren't going to cover that I should call out right away, it's how to actually set up Google Analytics on your site. There's a KB article in the handout that covers that. And I just didn't want to take up the time that we need to talk about the new features. But basically, if you're using the UW theme on your WordPress site, as was the case in Universal Analytics, where you had the ID for your analytics account, you'll still have a you'll have an ID now called a measurement ID, and you can paste that in the same box on the customizer, exactly the same as how it worked previously with the old version. But yeah, you'll switch from your old Universal Analytics ID to your new Google Analytics 4 ID when you're ready. Otherwise, you can also set it up through Tag Manager. So if you're familiar with Tag Manager, there's an option in the customizer. When you set up your Tag Manager account, you can take the ID from there, put it into the box labeled Google Tag Manager. It connects your website to the Tag Manager, and then you can run a Universal Analytics tag in parallel with the Google Analytics 4 tag, and you can run both of them at the same time through Tag Manager. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to send me a message, and I can get you up to speed on that, and take a look at the handout, because there's resources for doing that there. But primarily what we'll focus on today are some of the new features. So first off, what's the deadline? Google Analytics 4 is new, and we know that Universal Analytics is going away. So we need to start planning for this deadline. And the deadline is actually fiscal year 24. So July 1st, 2023 is going to be the cutoff date for Universal Analytics. It's just going to stop collecting data. It's going to continue to work for some time. They haven't actually announced any sort of end date that you won't be able to access your data anymore, but Google's recommending that you export your data. Unfortunately, Google isn't really offering a great way to export your data. Basically, the export tools that you already have are what you're going to have to use to export your data. So what that means is when you go to your report, you can export a Excel spreadsheet, or you can export a PDF copy of things. It's not exactly, exporting everything. There isn't really a way to copy everything out. So you're going to have to pick and choose and decide what's most valuable to you. So new metrics and terminology, and I'm going to be clear, we're only covering some of these. There's more than I have in the slide deck for sure that are new, but you can find out more about that in the handout. So the ones that I'm going to talk about here, they're really the ones that have come up in conversation quite a bit. Views in Google Analytics are now called data streams. These are basically this, what do you call them? Maybe they're basically your Google Analytics account. You can have multiple data streams, or previously you could have multiple views in your account. And each of them can have sort of unique filters placed on them. There's less filters available now in Google Analytics 4 than there were in Universal Analytics. But yeah, we'll cover that a little bit later. Just know views are now data streams, if you're familiar with the previous term. Bounce rate is also gone. It's now called engagement rate, and it's the inverse of what it used to be. Previously, a bounce rate was a percentage of how many users are coming to the site, visiting one page, and then bouncing off and leaving the site. Now it's called engagement rate, which basically is the percentage of people that come to the site and then continue on to engage. So take a look at resource number 3 and 8 in the handout for more information about that. Another change is that page views are now called views, and unique views is a metric from Universal Analytics that's no longer available in Google Analytics 4. So repeat views on a page are going to be counted now in Google Analytics 4. So take a look again at resources 3 and 8 in the handout to learn more about the changes to the views metrics. Another new metric is active users. And this is going to be the primary user metric for Google Analytics 4. What it refers to are users that have been active within the last 28 days. The session metrics haven't really changed that much in Google Analytics 4. but you'll find new metrics for engaged sessions, engaged sessions per user. So take a look at resource 5 and 8 in the handout for those. But those are basically sessions that are tied to that engagement rate that we talked about on the previous slide. And also, if you're familiar with segments, segments and universal, sorry, what? Someone asked a question. Segments in universal analytics were basically a way to filter down to a subset of users to create basically a demographic group or a psychographic group sort of, or geographic group of users, and then compare your reports based on those segments. You still do all of that in Google Analytics 4. It's just called audiences now. So for a full list of the metrics and dimensions in Google Analytics 4, see resource 8 in the handout. That's the full list of all the metrics that are available. All right, so data streams. As I mentioned, views are now called data streams. And when you set up your account, the first thing that's going to come up after you create your account is the data stream panel. This is where you're going to find your measurement ID and the code snippet to add onto your site, which most of you won't have to add a code snippet to your site. As I mentioned before, you can use the measurement ID in the UW theme for your WordPress site, just as you place the same, the same ID from the Universal Analytics into your website. It's all the same. We have the tags all updated, so it's ready to go. Just put your measurement ID into that place on your site and take a look at the handout for the KB article about doing that. But it also has a section on there called More Tagging Settings. You see that in the screenshot here. This is where you'll go to place filters onto your data stream, similar to the view filters. They're a little different in data streams. This is how you can set up IP filters for internal traffic. You can set up cross-domain tracking, and you can also enable tracking of your pre-existing Universal Analytics events, amongst a few other things. So let's talk about each of those here real quick. So filtering internal traffic, this is something we do quite a bit on campus. You can do this by IP address or a range of IPs. And as I mentioned, yeah, you can find that right there in the more tagging settings section. There's nothing too complicated about this. As you can see in the screenshot, basically you just can construct your list of IPs and you should be good to go if you already know what they are. Tracking multiple domains. You won't have to do too much cross-domain tracking in Google Analytics 4 on whisk.edu sites. So cross-domain tracking is only needed if you're tracking multiple sites on separate top-level domains. So if you have a whisk.edu site and a .com site, you're going to have to set up cross-domain tracking to track the two of those into the same data stream. But if there are two whisk.edu sites, you shouldn't have to. Tracking events. So Google Analytics 4, events are a little bit different. In Universal Analytics, they use the category, action, and label parameters. If you're familiar with those, those were the out-of-the-box parameters. So you give every event a category, an action, and a label. Google Analytics 4 doesn't do that anymore. They allow basically, I think it might be an unlimited amount of parameters. So you can set custom parameters. So you can see in this screenshot, this is an example of a contact form submission, and I'm submitting the form name and a page. And I could submit the first name of the person from the form or whatever I wanted to do. You can basically set up whatever custom parameters you want to pass into the event, to pass into Google Analytics. A good one to know about are currency and price. When you're tracking a conversion, currency and price, or currency and cost, I cover this later in the presentation, but defining the currency and the value of conversion is necessary in order to assign a value to a conversion. So you actually need to pass those parameters in with your event. And when you do that, Google Analytics will know how to handle that, and it'll attribute the value to the conversion. But without those, it won't. And it needs the currency as well. So if you create an event in Tag Manager, you're also going to need to declare it in Google Analytics 4, or else it's going to be ignored. This is a little bit different than Universal Analytics. It's actually a good thing. It keeps your events a little bit cleaner, whereas previously, any event that you passed to Google Analytics, it would track them all. And now you can keep it a little bit cleaner by deciding specifically which ones you want included in your data stream. So if you have multiple data streams, you might basically be pushing different events to different data streams, for instance. So to declare an event in Google Analytics, on the sidebar of the Google Analytics interface, there's Home, Reports, Explore, Advertise, Configure. You're going to go to Configure, and then you're going to navigate to Events. And then there's a button to create an event. You're going to give it a name, and the name of your event, as you can see in the screenshot, I'm giving the custom event a name, and then I'm saying matching conditions, event name equals form submission. So in my previous slide, let me go back there quick. I had an event name of contact form submission. And then these don't match, but I'm saying event name equals contact form submission here. And once I set this up, that will allow Google Analytics to start tracking that event that's submitted to it from Google Tag Manager. And you can also track your Universal Analytics events in Google Analytics 4 by going back to the more tagging settings on your data stream and enabling the feature labeled Collect Universal Analytics Events. So when you do this, what it's going to do is it's going to use the action as the event name, and then category, label, and value will just be properties on that event. In some cases, it might be better to recreate the events rather than using your old ones, depending on the naming conventions you're using, or if you can get more functionality out of the new ones, but it really depends on the resources that you have available to do this sort of work. So there's some built-in event tracking in Google Analytics 4. And you can find this in the enhanced measurement panel, which is also on your data stream settings. So you can automatically track file downloads, outbound clicks, scrolls, site search, and video views if you'd like to. But you can always enable this later. So if you want to just leave this disabled when you set up your account, you can always come back to it. And then tracking conversions. So conversions are basically just flagged events. What you do to set up a conversion in Google Analytics 4 is you go to the configure section of the site and you click the button that says new conversion event, and then you just declare the event. So as you can see in the screenshot, there's a field that says name your event. Basically, I'm just saying that in here I would put contact form submission and save it. And then every time the contact form submission event fires off, it'll flag it as a conversion. And then if I have the value in currency parameter assigned to that event, it'll track that value along with the conversion to sort of do the totaling up of the value of all of the conversions over time. So that's how you record a conversion. It's basically just flagging an event. It's a little bit of a pivot from the previous universal analytics. Now, audience filters. And audience filters are great, just like segments in universal analytics. What they do are you can use them to produce comparisons of the different segments of your visitors. So in this example in my screenshot, I'm showing a segment of users that's just visitors coming from Madison and Milwaukee, and they're using they're arriving through a search engine other than Bing. So I have a couple, I'm in this screenshot, I'm showing include users when city exactly matches Madison, Wisconsin, or exactly matches Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a session that came from organic search, and I'm excluding when they've arrived from Bing. And then when you create these audiences, you can then use it throughout your dashboards. At the top of your reports, typically you're going to be viewing things under the all users audience. But if you click the add comparison button, you can add your audience there and do a comparison between all users and your audience, or you can get rid of all users and just look at your audience. So it's very flexible. You can use it throughout your dashboards. So here's the fun part. So the reason that I'm really excited about Google Analytics 4, but what is also going to be a bit of a challenge for some users, is that Google Analytics 4 is really customizable. What it comes with out of the box might feel like you've given up some functionality. When you go into Google Analytics 4, you're going to find that there's fewer reports than you previously had in in Universal Analytics. But what Google Analytics 4 gives you is a great starting point where it's a little bit minimal to start with, but you can create and edit and customize your own reports and build the dashboard that works best for you. But with that, it's a little bit of work, and you're going to have to familiarize yourself with these tools somewhat. So it's depending on the resources you have to devote to building out your dashboard, this might be a little bit more challenging for your group. So what you see here in this screenshot is this is the sidebar in Google Analytics 4. If you've been in there yet, you're probably already familiar with this. But as you can see, there's collections, there's topics, and there's reports. So it's basically a folder structure. Collections are the highest level. Topics are basically folders within a collection. And then within those topics, there's individual reports. And you can create these reports, topics, and collections in your library, which is right below the reports on your sidebar. So collections. As I mentioned, these are groupings of reports and topics. You can edit the pre-existing collections by adding, removing, or organizing reports in your topics, or you can create your own collection. You do this from the library. As you can see in the bottom screenshot there, there's a button to create a new collection or to edit the collection. And then when you edit it, in that top screenshot, you can see how you can basically just drag and drop to move around the reports that are in the collection. You can remove them, or you can drag new ones in from the right-hand side there. So there's a couple kinds of reports. There's detail reports, as you see in that top screenshot. That's similar to the reports that we had in Universal Analytics, where there's, in this case, there's a bar chart, there's a timeline, and there's a data table. These are the primary reports that you'll usually be making. So these allow you to add dimensions, add metrics that you want to look at with your dimensions, and then you'll generate a fairly standard detail report with that bar chart, the timeline, and the data table. There's a few tweaks that you can make to that, to what the charts are, but generally you start with something that looks pretty similar to that, that screenshot there at the top. Summary reports are a simplified view of your detailed report. So when you create a detailed report, from the detailed report, you can create a summary card, which basically just focuses on a single dimension, and you can put a couple metric comparisons for that dimension into place to create things like this pie chart that I have in that screenshot for the summary card. And then overview reports, those are just collections of summary cards. So a lot of the reports that you see when you're looking through Google Analytics 4 are actually the overview reports, which are just summary cards from other reports. So this might be a lot to take in right now, but when we start looking at the tool a little bit more later in the presentation, I think this will become a little bit more clear. So the overview reports, as I mentioned, are collections of multiple summary cards. So there's a lot that come out of the box. These are pre-made by Google, but as I mentioned, you can make your own. Detail reports, we already kind of discussed all of these, but as I mentioned, you can make your own of these. And there are a lot of templates to start with to create these. And then the summary cards, as you can see in the bottom screenshot, you can create a new card from the customize area on your detail report editor. So I'm about at time, but I'm going to switch over here to Google Analytics 4. Let me just move some stuff around. All right. And I'm going to show you this a little bit real quick, if anybody has time to stick around. Basically, all of this exists here in reports under library. Just waiting for this to load here. So I can edit my collection here for, this is the life cycle collection. I can drag and drop things around here, or I can create my new report. Just waiting for this to load. So I can create a detail report here. Might not have much data in here to really create this. But then you can create a card. You can create your card, and then once you have these cards, you're able to create these, oops, you're able to create these overview reports in here where you can add either these pre-made cards or your custom-made cards. So that's really the bulk of the changes with Google Analytics 4, really the thing to know is how to make your own reports. Start making your own reports, start customizing your audiences, and turn Google Analytics into the analytics tool that you need, rather than using the out-of-the-box software that was offered in Universal Analytics. It's nice mainly because it gets rid of all of the stuff that was in the way. You can tailor it to exactly what you need to see, keep it really clean, and you can have the dashboard that's most suited for your particular business needs. So that's about it for me. Let's see if we have any questions or anything. We're a little bit late on time, so if you need to cut me off, feel free.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Jonathan. I think since this is the last session, there's, we won't be impeding on anybody else's time. So I'm sure, like, if you're okay hanging out for a minute,
yeah.
If anybody does have questions, feel free to stay on and ask Jonathan. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. And I may go ahead and, I don't know if I should stop the recording. Well, I guess I'll leave it recording for a bit here, but thank you very much. And are there any questions, last minute questions for Jonathan? And feel free to drop in the chat or unmute your mic if you feel comfortable. There was one question early on, Jonathan, about filtering, internal filtering, and how they would get those campus IPs, I guess. Do you have a
Usually
easy suggestion? Yeah.
Usually I reach out to who's ever sort of in charge of those sorts of things. Usually, it can sometimes depend on what organization you're working with. So if we're looking to filter out IPs from a particular building or a particular division on campus, I might have to reach out to their IT department to get those IP ranges. Generally, I don't personally know what they are. I just have to kind of do a little bit of networking and
find the right contact.
Yeah, there's usually somebody available that has that. It's just if somebody has a list of those sorts of things that they can provide in chat or anything, that would be great to provide that. I don't actually have that on hand, though.
That's helpful. I'm sure that will help the person who had the question.
Yeah. I'll jump in here real quick, Jonathan. It's Matt. I'll say that people who are looking for that kind of stuff, I would say reach out to your local IT. They may have a good idea of that. Otherwise, check in with help desk. Help desk may have some sort of way to bump a ticket up to the correct people to give those IP ranges.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, cool.
Any other questions? Yeah, it looks like I don't see any other questions, so I suppose we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Well, thanks again, Jonathan, and thanks everyone for attending.
Everybody.